The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. I'm George McNamee, the chairman of the company's board of directors, and I'll act as chairman of the meeting today. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the 2020 annual meeting of stockholders of Plug Power. The annual meeting of stockholders is now called to order. In light of public health concerns surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, we're conducting the annual meeting virtually instead of in person to protect the health and safety of our stockholders and employees. As with in-person meetings, stockholders will be able to vote and ask questions during the meeting. You can view the agenda for today's meeting in the virtual meeting portal on the section titled Handout on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Our meeting materials, including our annual report, proxy statement, and rules of conduct for today's meeting, have been provided as a virtual handout. Stockholders can submit questions online at any point during the meeting by entering them in the designated field of the web portal. During the first portion of this meeting, all discussion will be limited to the formal business. Following adjournment of the formal business, we will respond to questions from stockholders as time permits. Each person limited to one question. Before proceeding to the formal business, I'd like to introduce the officers and directors of the company who are with us today. Andy Marsh, our president and chief executive officer and a director. Paul Middleton, our senior VP and chief financial officer. Jerry Conway, our senior vice president, general counsel and corporate secretary. Sanjay Suresh, our chief strategy officer. Keith Schmidt, our Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. Marty Hull, our Corporate Controller and Chief Accounting Officer. In addition, we are fortunate to have the services of talented individuals as directors. Gregory Canousis, Chairman of our Audit Committee. Gary Willis, Chairman of our Compensation Committee. Maureen Elmer, Chairman of the Corporate Governance and Nominating Committee. In addition, Johan Minnow Roth, Lucas Snyder, and Jonathan Silver. Also joining us today are Mike Draves, Dean Giesler, and Andrew Allen of KPMG, our independent registered public accounting firm, and Bob Whalen and Audrey Lay of Goodwin Procter, our outside counsel. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Now let's proceed to the formal business of the meeting. Notice of the annual meeting and proxy materials were sent to all stockholders of record as of the close of business on April 13th, 2020. Only stockholders of record on that date are entitled to vote at this meeting. A complete list of the stockholders of record as of the record date, certified by an officer of Broadridge, the company's transfer agent, has been available electronically for the last 10 days and has been available for inspection by any stockholder. The company has designated Christine Amrain of American Election Services to serve as the independent inspector of elections. Ms. Amrain has signed an oath of inspector of elections, which will be filed with the records of this meeting. Immediately prior to calling this meeting to order, I confirmed the following with the Inspector of Elections. As of the record date, there were 323,158,795 shares of common stock and 2,620 shares of Series C redeemable convertible preferred stock, convertible into 2,782,075 shares of common stock outstanding and entitled to vote. Accordingly, 162,970,436 shares, represented in person or by proxy at this annual meeting, constitute a quorum. 215 million shares are represented either in person or by proxy at this meeting, and I therefore declare that a quorum is present. We'll now proceed to transact the business for which this meeting has been called. Let me briefly describe the voting procedures. If you have previously turned in your proxy, you do not intend to change your vote, it's not necessary that you complete another proxy or ballot. Your voting will be counted. If you're eligible to vote and have not submitted your proxy, or if you want to change your vote, you may do so by clicking the voting button on the web portal and following the instructions there. It's now 10:10 on June 5th, 2020, and the polls for each proposal to be voted on in this annual meeting are open. There are 3 orders of business on the agenda. First order of business is the election of 2 Class 3 directors for a 3-year term. Such term to continue until the annual meeting of stockholders in 2023 and until each director's successor is duly elected and qualified, or until his earlier resignation or removal. As set forth in the proxy statement, the Board of Directors has nominated Lucas P. Snyder and Jonathan Silver as Class 3 directors of the company. The company's bylaws require that a stockholder provide advance notice of a stockholder's intent to nominate persons as directors. No such notice was received by the company. Accordingly, I declare the nominations for directors closed. For Proposal 1, the affirmative vote of a plurality of votes cast by the holders of shares present in person or represented by proxy at this meeting and entitled to vote is required for the election of any director nominee. Each stockholder is entitled to vote for or withhold his or her vote from the nominee, and cumulative voting is not permitted. The Board of Directors recommends that stockholders vote in favor of Proposal 1. Proposal 2. The second order of business is the approval of a non-binding advisory resolution regarding the compensation of the company's named executive officers, as described in the proxy statement. The vote on Proposal 2 is advisory, and therefore it's not binding on the company, the Board of Directors, of the Compensation Committee of the Board. But we take shareholder opinion very seriously. We ask the shareholders to approve on a non-binding advisory basis the following resolution. Resolved that the stockholders of the company approve on an advisory basis the compensation paid to the company's named executive officers as disclosed in the proxy statement pursuant to Item 402 of Regulation SK, including the compensation discussion and analysis, compensation tables, and narrative discussion. For Proposal 2, the affirmative vote of a majority of shares of common stock present in person or by proxy at the meeting and entitled to vote on this proposal is required for its approval. Each stockholder is entitled to vote for or against, or to abstain from voting on the proposal. The Board of Directors recommends a vote for the compensation of our named executive officers. Proposal 3. The third order of business is ratification of KPMG as the company's 2020 independent registered public accounting firm. The Audit Committee of the Board of Directors appointed KPMG to serve in such capacity, and the Board of Directors approved the selection. Stockholder ratification is not required by the company's bylaws. However, the Board of Directors is submitting this to the stockholders for ratification as a matter of good corporate governance. If the stockholders do not approve the selection of KPMG as the company's independent registered public accounting firm, the Board of Directors and the Audit Committee will reconsider the appointment. The affirmative vote of a majority of shares of common stock present in person or by proxy at the meeting and entitled to vote on this proposal is required for approval. Each stockholder is entitled to vote for or against, or to abstain from voting on the proposal. The Board of Directors recommends a vote for the ratification of the appointment of KPMG as the independent registered public accounting firm of the company for its fiscal year ending September 31st, 2020. Anyone who's voting through the virtual portal, please submit your vote now. The Inspector of Elections cannot accept proxies or votes or changes or revocations submitted after the closing of the polls. So I'm going to pause for a few seconds for voting. It's now 10:20 on June 5th, 2020, and the polls for each proposal to be voted on at this meeting are now closed. No additional proxies or votes and no changes or further revocations will be accepted. I ask the Inspector of Elections to please tabulate the votes and provide me with a report on the results of each proposal. I will now announce the results of the foregoing votes. I've been informed by the Inspector of Elections that a plurality of the votes cast at this meeting, either in person or by proxy, have been voted in favor of the election of Lucas Snyder and Jonathan Silver as Class 3 directors. Accordingly, Lucas Snyder and Jonathan Silver are elected as directors for a 3-year term, such terms to continue until the annual meeting of stockholders in 2023, and until each director's successor is duly elected and qualified, or until his earlier resignation or removal. I've been further informed by the Inspector of Elections that the majority of shares of common stock present in person or by proxy at the meeting and entitled to vote have been voted in favor of the advisory resolution regarding the compensation of the company's named executive officers, and the ratification of KPMG as the company's 2020 independent registered public accounting firm. Accordingly, each of these proposals is approved. The final results of the meeting will be made a part of the minutes of the meeting and will be published in the current report on Form 8-K no later than 4 business days from today. There being no further business to come before this meeting, I hereby declare this meeting adjourned. And I thank you all for your participation. I'll now turn the floor over to our CEO, Andy Marsh, for some remarks on the company's business, and then we'll open the floor to stockholder questions.
Well, thank you.
Before Andy presents, Jerry wants me to read the safe harbor.
Okay.
Okay?
If we move to slide number 2, then it would be great, because that's where the safe harbor is.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm not going to read all of that, but I'll make a brief statement that during Andy's presentation, he will make forward-looking statements regarding our business. Such forward-looking statements are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those expressed or implied in such statements. Applicable risks and uncertainties include risks relating to the company that can be found in our filings with the SEC, including our most recent quarterly report on Form 10-Q filed with the SEC on May 8, 2020. Andy?
Well, thank you, George. If you could move to slide number 3, that would be great. Well, good morning, everyone. As George mentioned, I'm Andy Marsh. I'm the CEO of Plug Power. It's a pleasure to talk to you all today, even if it's virtual. And when I was sitting down putting together this presentation, I was thinking about the last 5 years and how this company has changed. Revenue increased by about 5 times. If I look at this year, we'll do over $300 million in gross billing. Last year was the first year we were EBITDA positive, and this year will be $20 million. And we also have a clear plan to build this business to $1 billion in revenue by 2024, with EBITDA of $200 million and operating income of $170 million. But you know, the journey's been beyond just revenue growth. You know, we've developed if you looked at Plug Power 5 years ago, many people would say to me, "You're just a good system integrator." And we remain a really good system integrator, the best in the field in the fuel cell industry. But on top of that, look over the past 5 years. Now we are the largest manufacturer of MEAs in North America. Now, if you look at this quarter, more than 95% of the product we ship out the door uses Plug Power stacks, and that's soon to approach 100%. If I look at the world, 5 years ago, we sold material handling fuel cells. Today, we have a full suite of ProGen engines, which can address opportunities like on-road vehicles, ground support equipment, aeronautical applications, as well as large-scale backup power systems. And finally, I think many of you noticed that we're pushing ahead with our hydrogen strategy. We're going to become, by 2024, delivering more than 50% of our hydrogen to customers as green. This will be positive for Plug Power from both increased revenue as well as an opportunity to greatly enhance our gross margins. We're doing this, and I think folks who've known me for a long time, I listen to customers, and customers have told us they want green hydrogen. But we also see it as an opportunity to continue to support our expansion. And not only customers are telling us they want green hydrogen, we're hearing it from investors, we're hearing it from employees. When I look at it, it's a trend where Plug is again a leader. And when you look at all the fuel cell companies in the world, all the hydrogen companies in the world, no one has done what Plug has done. Let's go to the next slide and I'll show you. Plug Power has shipped over 32,000 units. Those units have operated well over 300 million hours, and they've ran over 1 billion miles. No one has anything that comes close. If you look at Plug Power, we've built over 80 hydrogen fueling stations. It'll be 120 by year's end. These stations use 27 tons of hydrogen per day. And overall, we've done over 27 million fuelings in the history of Plug Power. And look, we're not doing this for simple customers. It's being done for Walmart, Amazon, BMW, Carrefour, IKEA. These are demanding customers who expect our products to be working all the time. If you move to the next slide, during COVID-19, we've shown that. Now, if you look at it, we're working in these 24/7 distribution centers, which have been essential to the U.S. economy. 30% of retail food in the United States during the first quarter of the year, somewhere along the line, touched a Plug Power product. And I guess what I'm most pleased with is that we've been offering a high reliability. These customers have seen 99% uptime of their equipment, well beyond our commitment to them. And we're doing it in applications which have been surging. You look at some of the distribution centers we've been operating in, it's been over 30% higher than we've seen during even peak periods. Peak periods are during Christmas time. Taking a final step back, one of the reasons we're one of the few companies that can confidently reiterate our commitment for gross billings and EBITDAs for the year. Our commitment of $300 million, we're 5 months ahead where we normally are. We have 99% of the orders in-house to meet this year's commitment. That's usually in November when we're at that point. Now, additionally, we're in strong position to achieve our EBITDA targets of over $20 million. So when I take a step back, during the COVID crisis, not only have we performed, we've seen new orders from our customers to allow us to achieve this year's goal. Moving on to the next slide, we haven't been only focused during the crisis on the business today. We've been thinking about the business for the future and how to execute our 5-year plan. Many of you saw that Plug Power did the U.S. first convertible green bond. We raised over $200 million on that bond. And we did that to aggressively move into the green hydrogen space. We have these 2 acquisitions will be concluded by the end of the second quarter at the moment, is our plan. The first is United Hydrogen. United Hydrogen runs the first liquid hydrogen plant in the world that was developed by a non-industrial gas company. This facility has 6.4 tons of hydrogen a day. It can produce up to 10 tons with minor modifications that we'll be making over the next 12 months. This acquisition, and when I stand back and look at it, this acquisition of United, they really are the first company to successfully deploy a liquid hydrogen system in the past 20 years. And when you think about that, it really uniquely positions Plug Power, because if you have to move hydrogen more than 100 miles, there's only one economical way to do that, and it's with a liquid. The second acquisition is an electrolyzer company. And that electrolyzer company will give us not only the ability to generate the green hydrogen for our present customer base, but also position the company to sell into other spaces, such as selling hydrogen for fertilizer, for ammonia plants, for steel and concrete manufacturing. My goal, and the company's goal, is to make Plug the leader in the world in the generation of green hydrogen. And if you look to the left on this slide, at least to my left, what you see is we have all the elements in place to be a leader. First and foremost, with the United acquisition, we have people who know how to build hydrogen generation plants. So we check item 1, and those plants will be powered with the renewable electricity and with the electrolyzer company that we're purchasing to generate the hydrogen. As I mentioned, United Hydrogen brings us unique liquefying of hydrogen technology so that we can put the hydrogen in a form that can be transported, as I mentioned before, more than 100 miles. United Hydrogen, as well as Plug's own capability, provides us the network to distribute hydrogen to customers. And finally, what really separates us is we have usage for that hydrogen today. By year end, our customers will be buying well over 35 tons of hydrogen to Plug Power, and self-generating that hydrogen will greatly enhance our margins. And we're looking to do this not only by ourselves, but with partners in the future. If you move to the next slide, I'd like to tell you about how big this market opportunity is. These aren't Plug Power generated numbers. These numbers come from work that's been done by the Hydrogen Council, a global organization of 80 plus companies in this industry, as well as a McKinsey report, and actually multiple McKinsey and Bloomberg reports. And it expects the hydrogen economy will be $2.5 trillion in the future. Plug Power has all the elements to support that economy. We can provide you the hydrogen. We can provide you the fueling stations. And if you look at the different markets we're participating in, we have the fuel cells to address that market for material handling, where today, more than 95% of the fuel cells which have been deployed in material handling has been done by Plug Power. With our ProGen line, we have a set of products that is ideal for electric vehicle integration, which I'll tell you more about during this presentation. And finally, the stationary market. We've been focused for small scale stationary products for telecommunications. We've done one of the largest networks in the world, and the largest in North America with the Southern Company over the past 2 to 3 years. And I think we are well positioned in 5G. And with our ProGen line, we are well positioned to move into data centers. So let's look a little closer at our products if we can move to the next slide. The next slide, please. So our products, are labeled, as many of you know, under the GenKey umbrella. I want you really to think about this a bit. Our stationary product is GenSure, which are modular solutions. Our GenDrive module, or modular solutions. Both of them use the same elements that are used in our ProGen engine. GenDrive is meant for material handling, GenSure for small scale stationary, and ProGen is modular engines designed for a wide variety of applications. And we can provide you the fuel with our GenFuel offering, as well as build you the hydrogen infrastructure. And Plug is the largest manufacturer of infrastructure. And finally, all these products, fueling stations, the ProGen engines, the GenDrive products, all can be remote monitored from our office in Dayton, Ohio, leveraging the Internet of Things, as well as doing predictive maintenance using artificial intelligence. So how do we sell these products if we go to the next slide? So you look in 2019, we shipped over 6,300 units. To meet our plans for 2024, we need to ship approximately 25,000 GenDrive units. Our company's been built on attracting big customers. And today, the fundamental customers for us are Amazon, Walmart, and a large retailer in home improvement. If you look at the market of how we expand, and between those three customers, not only are they approximately 8,000 to 9,000 units a year, it also provides us an opportunity every 6 years to recycle and refresh their fleet. Once you go to hydrogen and pull out the electrical infrastructure, cost to change is very expensive. And if you look at who are the customers we're looking to expand with, to turn into multi-site customers, every one of them are customers of Plug Power today. Take, for example, BMW. We have over 700 units at their facility in Spartanburg. We were adding units to their facility in Leipzig. You have people like Lowe's, Honda, GM, all who are doing major deployments with Plug Power. And when I think about expansion opportunities, and I talked about the opportunity for European expansion many times. And interesting, just like in the US, where we saw the COVID activity really gave an opportunity for our value proposition to shine, we're seeing the same sort of reaction out of Europe from customers like Carrefour. And in Europe and elsewhere, we're beginning to build global channels as we think through lower cost hydrogen. Folks like Linde, Steel, Engie, who has provided us a number of opportunities already. But I'm also beginning to develop dealer networks here in North America to help us support smaller customers and smaller sites as this business has a real mature product line at the moment, and we're past the point where anybody questions whether this technology can add value to the operation. And if you go to the next slide, which talks about our value, if you have a site with 200 fuel cells, I think it's a low estimation that you can save up to $900,000 a year, which actually pays for your forklift truck fleet. And why does it save you money? And it's all about labor savings. It's all about moving goods faster, which we saw during the pandemic was critical. The attributes of fast fueling, fill a unit in 2 to 3 minutes, the constant power, and the fact that we're able to eliminate the battery room, which can take up to 4 to 5% of a distribution center. And a prime example is what is going on at a REIT today. If we can move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. So a REIT located outside Chicago, Illinois, runs an international food business. And they convert it to plug power for their freezer application, which actually just runs 35 units. But when you take a step back, and this is what they published, that moving to plug power fuel cells increased their productivity by up to 100%. In this application, you have a lot of lifts, 50 feet ceilings, and the constant power of plug power fuel cells are ideal. As everybody knows, batteries perform poorly in freezers. Plug power fuel cells don't care if it's a freezer or whether it's at 75, 80 degrees outside. And I think that in their calculation, they've gained productivity every day of over 234 hours in a 3-shift day, and you're only talking 35 trucks. We're creating great value for Aritza and other customers who are using plug power fuel cells. So when you go to the next slide and you look and you think about on-road vehicle applications, what I've really been talking about with fuel cells and material handling is how to better utilize your asset. You think about fuel cells versus battery electric vehicles. If you have an asset on the road for 10 hours, you want to stop an hour and a half to charge a battery, or fill that unit up in 5 minutes? Do you want twice the range? And another advantage for fuel cells in applications like delivery vans, taxi services, ground support equipment at airports, is the fact that these assets, you can store more fuel on board and move more packages because you're using fuel cells instead of batteries. And if you flip to the next slide, I think it tells it all. So on the left, there is a graph of range of fuel cell vehicles versus battery electric vehicles. This chart's not a plug power chart. It was done by DHL. I've seen similar charts by many of the large automakers for minimum operating requirements for an application like a Class 3 delivery van is shown by the red line. And if you look at where battery electric vehicles, as you go further and further, and somewhere around 100 miles, a battery electric vehicle in a Class 3 truck just doesn't meet the minimum requirements, because fuel cells at that point have 10 times the energy density of batteries. Because to continue further range, you have to add an additional battery. With a fuel cell, all you have to do is add a slightly larger tank, just like a traditional gasoline power truck. If you move to infrastructure costs, people think electric vehicle infrastructure is simple. But, if you look up to about 15 vehicles, it's true, electric vehicle charging is lower cost than fuel cell charging. Very much though, like the power density issue we're talking about. With hydrogen, you have built one fueling station that can serve 15 cars or hundreds of cars or hundreds of trucks. With battery electric vehicles, you have to add more power, more charging continuously. This is why for fleet vehicles, fuel cells have a unique advantage versus battery electric vehicles. As not only do you have simpler infrastructure, you also can utilize that asset much more effectively. If we move to the next slide, it'll tell you about our relationship with Lightning, who is one of the integrators we work with. And with Lightning, we're introducing products in the fourth quarter of this year. This is a relationship with Amazon set us up with. Additionally, we have a number of other integrators Plug has been working with, and Plug Power's ProGen units are being tested by a number of OEMs around the world for use on on-road vehicles. Moving to how we do it, on the next slide. I come from a background where one thinks about how you address multiple applications with the same structure. And here you see applications from drones to large-scale stationary. But if you go into the heart of these products, where Plug Power is leveraging our MEA technology, our stack technology, our balance of plant capability, essentially all the elements for a 5 kilowatt system, same MEA, same technology, is used in the 15 megawatt system. If you take a step back, all the balance of plant, how you control it, is done with the same electronics. This scope economy, coupled with all our experience in designing products, not only allow us to be well positioned today, but well positioned for the future. And if you go to the next slide, these engines are used in our stationary products today. As I mentioned, I think in the beginning of this call, we did over 400 of these units with the Southern Company, which was doing one of the first pure LTE networks in the world. When you think about the 5G build out, fuel cells can save you money because you can integrate the fuel cells directly in the cabinet instead of having an external diesel engine. It's why we won in this application. Then when you look at large scale data centers, a good deal of work Plug is doing in this area today. And you think to yourself, why would you replace a CAT generator at a data center? This is a big market. And the reason is actually fairly simple. Communities around the world do not want to have a noisy generator on site in local communities. Go to Virginia, go to California, go to Singapore. They are banning diesel generators at these kind of facilities. Then take a step back and think about the commitments these customers, people like Microsoft, are making to have a green footprint. I think many of you know Microsoft has made a commitment that by 2030 they will have a zero carbon footprint and ultimately clean up all the carbon since the start of the company, since 1976. And you can't have a diesel generator running 1 hour a day and during backup time if you're running on diesel fuel. And fuel cells are a far superior solution versus batteries, very much for the same power density issues that we see in large scale vehicles. That's why we see this as a huge market opportunity for Plug Power. And all these apps, if we move to the next slide, need hydrogen. Plug Power, people talk about building a hydrogen highway. As I mentioned, we've built over 80 stations. We'll be over 120 by the end of the year. Today, You could drive and stop outside of Walmart distribution centers from Lewiston, Maine, all the way to Riverside, California, and could get hydrogen fuel. No one else. And if you look out towards 2024, there'll be 500 of these stations. So when you think about people talk about the hydrogen highway, there is a commercial hydrogen highway that already exists, and it's building. We have the fueling station, we have the generation capability, we have the users, and if you look at the numbers we have and produce, these are dreams for everybody else. They're Plug Power's reality today, and it's continuing to grow. If you move to the next slide, one of the items we start out this discussion with is green hydrogen. And why do I believe in green hydrogen? Now, I started thinking about this. Customers are demanding green hydrogen, and ultimately, the cost of green hydrogen is lower than hydrogen from natural gas. When you're at 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour, we're on par. And when you start thinking about where the cost of renewables are going, where you're thinking 2, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, hydrogen becomes a very cost-effective solution. And then I think about if you're building a new network, and that's what Plug is doing. It reminds me, from my old telecom day. When China went to build a network, did they build a wireline network? Well, many of our competitors have networks which are fossil fuel-based networks, which are really about the same as having an old wireline network. In the telecom world, countries jump to wireless. I can tell you, if you're doing this to have a green footprint and continue to meet carbon goals, and on top of that, have a lower cost, do you want to be running green hydrogen assets like Plug Power, or have fossil fuel assets which have large depreciations, generating hydrogen from dirty sources at a higher cost? And that's why we're building the future and have built the future by generating green hydrogen. So if you move to the next slide to talk about all the different apps. One of the items that I don't think many people appreciate, we had from Caltech a professor come to the Plug Power 5-year plan when we rolled it out. And if you're doing storage over 11 hours a day, hydrogen is much more of a viable solution than batteries. And for many of the reasons, both environmental and power density, that we talked about in other areas. And when you think about power and storage, it is a large opportunity for Plug Power. We'll know how to take renewable energy, turn it into hydrogen, as well as put it back onto the grid, which are large-scale systems. You think about transport. We have our ProGen engine. We also have the ability to build fueling stations. We've done more than anyone else, as well as the ability to provide the fuel. And I think many folks miss, when I look at this opportunity, the huge opportunity for industrial applications, concrete manufacturing, steel. These applications, if you're looking to create a green economy, need green hydrogen because electricity just won't work. You cannot get to the right temperature. And in buildings, you look at plans of people like National Grid, who look at using electrolyzers with offshore wind to generate hydrogen by 2040 and take all their natural gas pipelines, and instead of pumping natural gas, are providing hydrogen to the home. This is why McKinsey believes that hydrogen ultimately by 2050 will represent more than 18% of the world energy and a $2.5 trillion opportunity. So finally, going to the next slide. I started this call by talking about all we have accomplished. We've had this tremendous revenue growth over the last 5 years. We have great growth if you look at just the first quarter of 2019 versus the first quarter of 2020. Our revenue grew by over 89%. We're dominant in the material handling market. If you look at, and we're doing that with premier customers, Amazon, Walmart, BMW, Mercedes, around the world. We're well positioned on on-road vehicles with multiple integrators, as well as testing with some of the leading OEMs in the world. And finally, I see hydrogen as an opportunity to continue to grow and expand this business, as well as putting our products in 5G networks, large-scale stationary for data centers. Our ProGen modules, as I mentioned, can be used in a wide variety of applications. And if you move to the next slide, it's why Plug Power has confidence level that we'll be able to achieve the 5-year plan we rolled out past September, regardless of all the dynamics that have been going on around the world. We'll achieve our $1 billion in revenue. We'll have $750 million material handling, $200 million for on-road, $50 million for stationary. And when we announce our acquisitions, we'll be reviewing and increasing those numbers as Plug Power looks to continue to grow and dominate in the sectors we participate. So thank you, everyone. I'll now turn it over for the Q&A section.
Okay, Andy. First question is, can you discuss how will the pending acquisitions and vertical integrations in the hydrogen business impact the growth outlook for the company over the next 5 years? And is the timeline for the 2 acquisitions still by the end of the second quarter?
So the answer to part 2 of that question is yes, the timeline is for closing those deals by the end of the second quarter. I think during the talk today, I talked about the wide range of capabilities that Plug Power now has. When we announced the 5-year plan, I talked about a goal of shipping 50% of our hydrogen to customers as green, and actually more than 50% by 2024. With these acquisitions, we're in position to accelerate that, which is an opportunity to enhance our margins. It's an opportunity to increase our revenue. And as I talked about during the presentation, there's a wide range of applications for green hydrogen. And green hydrogen can be used in power processing and storage. Green hydrogen can be used in industrial applications, in buildings, as well as in our material handling equipment and on-road vehicles. We have customers, and as I mentioned, this will provide us an opportunity to more aggressively expand into other applications. So we see that this is a huge opportunity for Plug Power to continue to grow the business and grow well beyond our stated goals of $1 billion in 2024.
Okay, next question. How should we think about the economics of green hydrogen?
Sure, that's a real good question. So today, most people know hydrogen comes from natural gas, which is a fossil fuel. And when I have thought about that as a source, just like battery electric vehicles, folks are putting in charging stations today, which are being powered by coal. We've put in stations today, which, about 40% of the hydrogen actually does come from natural gas. A good deal of our hydrogen comes from waste streams. But by going pure green, there's an opportunity to really change the equation. And I showed on one of the slides the cost curves. And when you think about renewables, think about, I think many people have seen that stranded wind, stranded solar, in some places have negative electricity costs. So somewhere around 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour, which is achievable with renewables today. Hydrogen generated from green sources is competitive with fossil fuels. If you think about where we will be tomorrow by 2030, many people think about renewables in the 1 to 2 cents a kilowatt hour range. That puts hydrogen in the range of $1 in cost. And these are numbers just not presented by Plug Power. I would suggest investors and others who are interested go to the Hydrogen Council website. In January, there was published a paper that we worked with as the council in association with McKinsey, which talks about the cost of hydrogen with renewables being significantly lower than natural gas and showing the roadmap how to get there. And Plug Power plans to be the leader in making that happen.
Okay, next question.
Go ahead, Noah.
How should we think about the market expansion and growth opportunity with the pending acquisition of electrolyzer business?
Sure. Just to tie it back to my previous question, and I really think these are good questions because this is such a big opportunity for Plug. When you look around the world, Europe is talking about deploying 80 gigawatts of electrolyzers by 2030. That's a big number. And so when we think about where those electrolyzers are going to be used, we talked about during the talk today about all those applications, all the way from building power to industrial processes where the only real heat solution, if you're going green, is hydrogen. If you think about on-road vehicles and fueling, if you have commercial fleet vehicles, really the only solution is hydrogen. So hydrogen, not only do we have opportunities in power processing, industrial building, on-road vehicles, and you start digging deep into the details, there are large opportunities today that you can make a value proposition versus traditional fossil fuels where hydrogen from green sources is lower cost.
Okay, next question is, have you seen any positive customer traction as a result of your rapid response during COVID-19 or any increased activity from Amazon or Walmart?
So yes, yes, and yes. So with Amazon and Walmart, I think during the talk today, I talked about how we've never been in a better position. We have goal of $300 million in gross billings for 2020. 99% is in-house today. A lot of that, usually I'm in this position in early November. A lot of those new orders came in from Amazon, Walmart. Just this past week, though, we received orders from 2 or 3 other customers. And with one large customer, we actually received orders for deployments for 4 sites for 2020 and 2021. So we've seen momentum. And I would say the momentum has been strongest with those customers who have used this technology during the crisis.
Okay, next one following on that. Are you seeing acceleration in your sales cycles and customer adoption in your core market of material handling?
I think I'm going to separate that question. I think that the answer to your question is yes. And I think what we're seeing is, because of the crisis, my sales team have been working like this virtually and customers who we know and have a relationship with, we've certainly seen an acceleration in their desires to do deployments because of how we performed during COVID-19. We also are seeing greater engagement in Europe because in Europe, as I think many of you know, that the deployments in the recovery in Europe, there's a great push for green energy and hydrogen. We're seeing those customers becoming more and more engaged with Plug Power. We've been improving and increasing our European sales force. So I see that with those traditional customers in traditional markets, we're seeing more rapid acceleration. During this crisis, and maybe counterintuitive, it actually gives other customers who are working from home, who haven't used fuel cells and have seen the news about what we've done, an opportunity to reflect differently than you would when you're in the office all day, going 10 hours a day. And so our sales team have done many meetings like this virtually with new customers and new opportunities to help grow this business.
Okay, next question. Can you provide any update on activity related to expansion in the on-road market?
Sure. As we talked about during the presentation, we have a relationship with Lightning, who Amazon introduced us to. Lightning's doing BEV deployments with Amazon now. We also have a number of other integrators that we are engaged with, which we'll be doing deployments with during the next year. And finally, our products are being tested by a wide variety of OEMs in Europe and around the world, testing out plug-powered ProGen system for use in their vehicles. It is, if you look at it, it's an activity that Jose Crespo and Keith Schmid, our COO, spend a great deal of time on. These aren't fast sales process, but Plug Power's technology experience and the fact that we have worked in applications which are much, much worse than on-road vehicles. We're in freezers at minus 25 degrees C, instantly driving outside in the hot, humid weather where it rains on our units. We're seeing 10 times the shock factor that you see in forklift trucks than you would see for on-road vehicles. And we've proven the life of our products in real-world application. That's a huge differentiator versus anyone else who is out there in the marketplace.
Okay, next question, Andy. Are we going to see the GES market take off this year? And is the United Hydrogen acquisition related to this, especially geographically being located in the South?
I think you'll see more momentum. As many of you know, we had a successful trial with DHL in Germany. We have trials scheduled for Cincinnati with DHL. We have other trials going on with some of our customers today who have airport assets. We have really thought through how the ProGen engines can be easily integrated into these applications. So you'll see more news this year about GSE. I think you'll see sales start taking off mid-2021, early 2022 in this application.
Okay, next question. The Plug Power production of fuel cells looks manual. Is automation and technology in production not seen as valuable as business scales?
Oh, I think that what you're seeing is just the beginning. If you come to our facility today, we have robots involved in making our stacks. And we're really, we have plans which I think will roll out during the coming year as we expand our MEA production, which is all automatic. And we expand our stack production plans to make that an automatic process, that there'll be higher and higher levels of automation. And look, we're in early phases of this cost roadmap and cost down. Over the past years, every time we've doubled the number of units we ship, we've decreased our cost by 25%. As we ship more and more units, as we do more and more versions of our products, there'll be higher and higher levels of integration. And those higher levels of integration will simplify the manufacturing process, but also simplify our service model. So I agree today, there's lots of room for growth and improvement, and Plug Power has a manufacturing technology roadmap, starting with MEAs, automatic stack production, higher level of product integration that will allow the production to become more and more automated. Noelle, how about two more questions?
That was actually, I think, our time, Andy. I don't know if you want to go more, but
I'll take two more now.
okay. Let me line up. Just 1 second. Next question then, Andy, is when will the next new contracts be announced, and if so, how many?
Well, I would say this. We'll continue down our growth path we laid out for 2020. Our goal is to add one new large customer in 2020 for 2021. So we would be looking to announce that sometime during this year. But I also think you're going to see continued announcements on hydrogen, on electrolyzer sales. I think you'll see more announcements for items like large scale and small scale stationary. So there's lots of opportunities that we'll be able to share. I think one of the key items is, look, this business is all built on growing our revenue. And as we grow our revenue, we grow our margins. And we are on track and on path to reach that $1 billion goal. And as we grow I would suggest look at our revenue expansion each quarter, look at our margin expansion. That's how to measure we're on track. Over the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of fuel cell companies think it's real exciting to announce 1 or 2 trial type deployments. And my philosophy is you make announcements when it's real and significant. And Plug Power isn't looking just to do one-offs. We're looking to build a major business well beyond the $1 billion goal we have for 2024. And one last one, Noelle, if you got it.
Okay, final one, Andy. You gave us some color on the Lightning Systems test with Amazon. Can you provide some additional color on Class 8 OEM interest in testing, and when might we see some semi-trucks being tested on the road?
Most of the work that we are doing with OEMs is associated with commercial vehicles. So, I think you'll be seeing commercial vehicles on the road during the coming years. And I would expect you'll see some activity this year. And on that note, I want to thank the investors for calling into this meeting. I know it's a little bit impersonal. I miss engaging with the audience at the shareholders meeting because I often have very, very good offline conversations and get your insight into what's going on. Hopefully soon we can get together and we can talk and engage in person. But I do want to reiterate, before I leave today. Plug Power will meet our goals for 2020, and we are well on track to meeting our 2024 goals. And we will become a dominant player in green hydrogen. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time today.